Definitely one of the best dressed founders that I've run into. So do you want to sort of like explain the outfit?
Yeah, so for me, I've always wanted to like stand out, right, in everything that I do. And I'm from Ijebu, right, and Ijebus we always with our caps. So I thought, okay, if I can combine like the traditional and the more new style dressing, and so I always wear my cap with any clothes I wear.
The Fresh Prince of yeah, I love it. So let's get into it, right? So first question is, what would you say, like knowing your background, I know this is not your first company, you've gone through a few things before Mono, you've had a background working in tech as well. What would you say is the biggest difference between trying to get a business to work and running a business that's actually working?
Interesting question. So I think it depends on the industry. Right. I mean, if you look at like the traditional businesses, when you start, like, so for example, you want to start FMCG business, right? You kind of like know there's a bit of chance that it will work because there are people actually that need those goods, right? It's different from a tech startup where you're trying to figure out if it will work. Right, think of like Facebook, right? It was just like a fun project, like, oh yeah, let's see how we can connect people, right? Think of like Google and so on and so forth. It's different from like the traditional businesses where you know that if I build this thing, if I do this thing, there are like millions of people that will use it. It's not a question of like distribution, how do I get these things to people? But like for a tech company, right, it's like, oh, let's try and see if it works, right? But the good thing about tech is if it works, it's like it's going to be really huge, right? So I think that's how I see it.
So for example, when you started Mono, for example, and you were trying to get it to work, this was pretty new idea, especially for the place that you're trying to build.
Exactly.
And so what were some of the challenges? Let's say pre product market fit versus post product market fit. What would you say were some of the challenges on both sides of that?
Yeah, I think for Mono, because it's a relatively new idea, and also like the acceptance of asking customers to use their login details. It's not something that people are actually trying to run away from that because of the fraud, like in Nigeria as a whole. I mean, think of like 2014 when Paystack and all these other companies are trying to like get people to use their cards online, right? People didn't want to because like, why would I put my card online, right? But I feel like a lot of education had to like happen for people to get used to doing that. It's the same thing for Mono. When we started, we had to like do a lot of educational materials to get people to accept that, hey, using your login details online is safe through us because we make sure that you're safe, right? And I think after that, we started getting a lot of people to say, yeah, I can use my login details through Mono, right? Because I trust them. And one of the things that we're also trying to do now is like start doing outdoor advertisements. Since we started, we've never done any advertisement, but now I feel like it makes sense for us to get people that are not naturally online, right? They are not on Twitter, right? We do a lot of things on Twitter and LinkedIn, but not everyone is there, but they have login details to use, right? Maybe they want to take a loan, right? They know rent money, they know carbon, but they might not know Mono. But when we do all these outdoor advertisements, they might get to know, oh, this is the company that makes it possible for me to link my account online, right? So yeah.
Nice. And so it sounds like early on it was definitely all about gaining customer trust. People like, who's this random company?
Exactly.
I'm giving all my login details.
Exactly.
But now, you guys have a little bit of traction. You went through YC, you raised Series A. Things are starting to work a little bit.
Exactly.
So what are the challenges now? How is your life different now than it was?
So it's still not that easy, but I feel like we're at a point now where we're seeing a lot of traction in terms of like people connecting their accounts, which is like the first order that we want to like go over. And I think the second thing now is like talent, right? How do we get people to stay, right? Because now it's like people can work remotely and get much more money than we pay them, right? But it's not a question of like how do we keep people, right? And I spend most of my time on that, just like working with the management team. I'm more like, how do we keep people? Because most people might leave not because of the culture. Like we have a good culture at Mono, and people tell us that as well. But it's more of like, if I travel out of the country, can I get better opportunity? Right, and I think that's one of the things we're trying to build at Mono as well. Like, what if we can make it good, right? Such that you don't have to like travel out to get the same opportunity that you would get in Nigeria at Mono.
I love that. I love that. We try to do the same. We have like I mentioned, a global workforce. People in California, people in the Philippines, people in Kenya, etc. And it's like, how do you, using Slack?
Exactly.
How do you actually tie that up and make these people feel connected to each other and create a workplace that they're going to stay at?
Definitely.
You mentioned the whole social media thing, right? Now you guys are doing the outdoor stuff, you're doing social. One of the things that I personally admire about you is that you're always on my LinkedIn timeline. That's my Twitter line. So where did that come from, right? Like that's not necessarily a entrepreneurial skill. That's not every entrepreneur does that.
It's something
where did that come from?
So I think when we started early on, one thing that helped us very early on was because I was very outspoken on social media, right? Whenever we release a new product or a new feature, I'm always on Twitter just saying, oh, this is how it works, this is what we've built, and people were able to support us because it's more of like building in the public, right? I feel like I'm one of those founders that did that early on, right? Just like talking about what we're building and people were able to support, right? It's not just like you build it and then you say, oh, this is it, right? It's like, oh, this is what we want to build, right? And now it's out. People get excited when they feel like they're part of your process, right? So I made sure that everything that we do, even now that we're more of like a well-established company, I still try to do that. Oh, this is what we're trying to build. What do you think, right? And just like carry the community along, because I feel like as a company in Nigeria, everything evolves around community, right? Because these are the same people that are going to use your product. These are the same people that would tell other people about your product. So it's a good thing to like carry them along, like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we want to do, and this is it's out, right?
I just watched one of your interviews, a recent interview with Peter Timmy, and I learned a few things about you. One is that you're a prodigy of Boom. And also the second was I learned a bit about your father, who apparently was a millionaire at a very early age. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that sort of impacted you as well?
When I was very young, I saw my dad as like an entrepreneur. He has so many businesses, and one of the business that really got him to be a millionaire at the very young age was he was the first person to start the rental, like the traditional rental business, right, in Nigeria, right? He was renting tents, shares and stuff like that. But the other thing that he was also doing was selling electronics, right? He was selling like TVs, like everything that you would need to like fit in your electronics in the house or anywhere, right? So I started following to the office at a very early age, and I saw how he was able to bring people together and say, oh, this is what you should do, this is how you do it, right? And also he was a very straightforward person, right? He's a very straight shooter, right? So, and I learned that a lot from him as well. So I think that also impacted me when I left secondary school. I was like, what do I want to do? Right, it's either maybe I become, I wanted to be a footballer, right? Of course. And also like I wanted to study aeronautics as well. So it's either those two. But then I realized that those are more of like, for me to become that, I need to maybe like travel out, right? Because I haven't seen a lot of successful aeronautics person in Nigeria. It's like it's not like it's not a profession that a lot of people get into in Nigeria. So I went to start studying how to use Microsoft Word, like all the basics of Microsoft then, right? In early days. Then I started learning how to code, right? From then I moved to Lagos. I went to NIT to study programming. Then I dropped out because I was like, I've learned enough here, and I went to do an intern at Mobile, etc. So from there, I just like started my first business.
Similar story. My mother was an entrepreneur too. Do you feel like it's genetic? Is it a genetic talent, or how does this thing come about?
I think it's genetic, and also like it's all about the person as well, because there are other people that their fathers are like core entrepreneurs, but they decided to do something else because it wasn't something that they're excited about. I was excited about building my own company, right? And I think that combined with my dad and what I've seen my dad do, I was like, yeah, I want to do this as well.
So what was your first business? What would you say? Not even just ever. What was the first thing you sold? Like
I was selling MTN data. So I was actually I'll buy the data in bulk, and I'll sell it to people in the community. So then I also built like a very small website where you can request for data and also actually helping people increase their data in a way. So like that was like my first
I love it.
Also.
I love it. Similar, I used to sell t-shirts and candy when I was young. And I always feel like that most true entrepreneurs, not everyone, because people come to this thing from different angles, but many of us, there was something that you were selling.
Exactly.
If it was CDs, if it was doing hair, whatever it was, you were doing
because
something.
I feel like selling is like the first thing you have to be really good at as an entrepreneur, because you have to sell to your employees, right? To sell to investors, you have to sell to your customers. Like it's all about sell. So you have to be really good at that to actually become a successful entrepreneur.
I don't want to say biggest motivation, but like what's that mindset that you have that makes you special? Like what's your biggest motivation, I guess?
The most normal answer that people give. I feel like for me, I love seeing people become successful from what I've established. Right. So I think Mono today, it's not a company that builds products. Like it's more of like a company that builds people to build products.
I love that.
Right.
I love that.
So like, how do I make sure that everyone that comes into Mono becomes much better than they were when they came into Mono? Right. Because if you can do that, that means that they can also like impact our product in a good way. Right. So I'm not only focused on do this. I'm more focused like what are you doing every day in this company to become a much better person, to become a much better programmer, to become a much better salesperson, to become a much better marketing person, right? So, and what I spend most of my time on is like, how can I help you get to that point? Because one of the things, because for example, now we have one of our employees that's leaving the company to start his own company. And I get excited about that. And also invested in that company because I'm like, this is really good for you to leave Mono and say, I want to do something else, right? I want to build something else. And that's a good motivation for me as well.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that I look up to you about is the fact that you, even at an early stage, have been investing in a lot of early stage entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, right? I thought that was really amazing because same like you, I'm sure, and similar for me, is that other entrepreneurs really poured into me for me to get to this point, right? And I'm sure it was the same for you. Talk to me about why that is, because for me, honestly, while I do invest, it's kind of always by accident.
Like, it's not like intentional.
You know what I mean? I don't have this mindset like, I'm going to invest in X company this month or this year. Usually somebody comes up to me with a good idea. Maybe I have a connection to them. I think it's okay, and then I invest. How do you think about that? Do you have like a process around it, or?
So for me, when I started Mono, there was like our first investor that invested $100,000 without a product, without a name. It wasn't called Mono. It was called Project X and GitHub. So when that happened, I told myself that if I ever got to a point where I have enough to invest in companies or invest in founders, I will always do that because I want to be the same person that helped me very early on with advice and connections and money. I want to do the same thing for other entrepreneurs as well. That's the main motivation for me as a reason why I'm investing in a lot of founders today. And the other part is also, I want to make sure that the new generation of founders that are coming after me are not making the same mistake that I did, right? Even before Mono or my other companies, because I feel like I have so much experience just like starting companies, right? How do you build companies? How do you make sure that you don't fail? And I think it's also good that I've failed a lot because I know exactly what you shouldn't do, right? And those are the two things, right? The reasons why I invest in companies today.
I love that. You just said two things to me, which shows that you're a very people-centric person. One, the people that you're bringing into Mono. You're looking at Mono as a way to build people rather than just products. And then also, it sounds like you're pouring a lot into the entrepreneurs that you invest in. Who poured into you? Who are here's the opportunity, I guess, shout out some people that poured into you and helped you get to this point.
So I think one of them would be, early on, was uncle of mine giving me that opportunity to intern with his company, right? Because that really opened up a lot of opportunities for me to see that, this is how you do things, this is how other people are building companies, right? And I feel like probably the second person would be my brother. Just like helping me get to a point to understand that, hey, you can actually drop out to do things that you want, right? You don't, because he was the one paying for my school fees, right? If he was like, hey, you can't drop out, right? I've already spent a lot of money, right? So what he was like, yeah, you can drop out and build and go after what you want to do. The person that I would think really ushered me into this fintech and all this is probably like Shala. Right, at Paystack, because when I was doing Oya Pay, right, when the company failed, I told him like, hey, this is not working. I was like, yeah, come and join it at Paystack. And I feel like my experience at Paystack really helped me, like it opened me up to opportunities and also like things that can be done, right? And that's one of the things I tell a lot of young people now, that I think before you start a company, it makes sense for you to go work at an established institution or fintech or startup anywhere that is established, that is very successful, because you will learn a lot of things that you shouldn't do and that you should do, right? Mostly from the founders as well, right? So I think it makes sense for you to learn before doing, right? Even though like as an entrepreneur, you want to like jump into the into the work and say, yeah, I can learn as you go. But I feel like for you to be really successful, you need to like learn some things. I'll be afraid to say, yeah, I want to start my own company.
You know, now that you have a growing company, things are moving very fast for you. How has your personal life changed?
So I recently got married last year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that also helped, right? Because I feel like you go through a lot of things during the day. You definitely need someone that you can go back home to and say, hey, this is what's happening, this is how it's going, that you can have that conversation with. So it's really helpful. And I think the other part is like, when you're building a company, like I think the first 1 to 2 years, like you wouldn't really be chilled, right? Because you like all these investors, they've given you this money. You have to get the company to a point where it actually kind of run without you. Because I feel like that's one of the things you need to really focus on as an entrepreneur, right? How do you build that management team such that you can say, oh, Abdul is not here, and the company would actually run really well, right? Think of like all these other established companies, Facebook, Google, like the founders are actually not there anymore, and the company is still being successful, right? And I think in the early days as well, you need to start looking at how do you build that management team, that you don't have to be doing a lot of things almost every time, right? You can say, oh yeah, we have the best head of sales, right? We have the best head of business team. Like these are the people that would also take your own playbook. Because one of the things I've done like in the early days was have like a playbook, like how do we do design at Mono? Right? How do we do engineering at Mono? How do we do sales? Because I was really involved in all these things in the beginning. I was doing the sales, right? The first website of Mono, I designed it. The first logo, I designed it. The marketing, like I did everything all. So I know actually like what got us to a stage where we're able to raise money, right? And when that playbook is written, I'm like, you guys can then contribute to it. You can make it better because that's why you're here, right? So I think it's really good. Like in the first 2 to 3 years, right? You need to like start looking at how do you build your management team such that the only thing that you focus on is like how do we bring more investors, how do we bring the best people, right? How do we keep people? So there's like 3 things that you need to focus as an entrepreneur, as a company goes.
I hear you on that. I want to bring it to the personal life again, because for many entrepreneurs, like you mentioned, in the early years, you're working super hard. So for many of them, their work is their life. Right. So what was your thought process before deciding to get married? Like, is this can I balance this with my current work schedule and things like that? I just want to highlight that for
a lot of people think there's work-life balance in the startup stage. There isn't.
Right.
I think it will take you probably 10 years for you to get that balance, right? Even now, even with the management team we have, sometimes I don't sleep, right? Like you still have to keep your eyes on things and make sure that things are going well, even though you trust those people. But I feel like there'll be a certain point where you have to let people do their things and let them make mistakes and learn from it, right? Because you can't be there every time, right? But again, I think in the early days, you have to be really involved, and there's no like work-life balance.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't think there's any balance in outside success. I don't think that's very much balance. And you know, you try to find that. Obviously, we're all human beings, so you do get moments of rest and you know, people that you can be vulnerable with. But at the end of the day, if we're going to hit this mission, then, you know, you gotta there's a price to be paid for that. Do you feel like there's a particular trait that makes an entrepreneur great or successful? Obviously, people have different styles. If you were to interview an entrepreneur, like you had the job, hire the next great entrepreneur. Is there going to be, what does that job description look like? Was there something that you're looking for?
So I think number one is the idea they're trying to build. Is it something that they've actually faced, right? Is it a problem that they've also encountered, right? It's not like, I think this is the next shiny thing, right? I mean, so there's a lot of people building fintech companies now, and it's not like you actually have that problem, and that's why you're trying to solve it. Think of like Mono. Like Mono was a problem that I was trying to solve, right? And I wasn't trying to build Mono. I was trying to build a mobile application, right? But the infrastructure to power that mobile application wasn't like really there yet. So I was like, yeah, let me build the infrastructure, because I was trying to solve my own problem, right? And then people started saying, oh, I want to use this infrastructure, right? So when I see that kind of signal, which entrepreneur are trying to build something, I'm like, yeah, there's a 90% chance that this person will be successful with this, right? The only reason why they will fail is if they get tired, right? I feel like burnout is one of the biggest reasons why companies fail, because as a founder, if you can, and this is the reason why it's always good to have someone or something that you can fall back to when you start seeing that burnout signal, right? Because it happened in the early days when I was also building my company, right? I was totally burnt out, and it's like, yeah, I'm calling it quits. Right, and this same idea, I'm now seeing a lot of companies becoming successful in it. Right, imagine if I had like, so there's a lot of things that you have to go through, but one of them is just making sure that you have that sounding board of some things that you can fall back into, so you don't fully get burnt out. But yeah, I think the signal that I look for is like, are you trying to solve a problem that you've actually faced? And do you have the knowledge or the resources? And resources means like, do you have like a technical co-founder, or do you know how to like hire people really well? But if you have those things, then I think that can be a really good solution.
I agree. I think there's definitely a number of things. I think different entrepreneurs have different styles as well. Creativity in the idea, you know, having an idea you understand, as well as just like, there's a certain balance of know-how and risk taking that I look for. You get what I'm saying? Like, for example, I may meet somebody who's a brilliant engineer, but they're a very conventional thinker, and they don't want to like push the envelope. And when I hear that, I'm like, I don't know. You get what I'm saying? But there might be somebody that's maybe even less skilled, but they're trying to push. They're trying to you know, make something out of nothing. And I'm like, okay, this person has the right mindset. And even if they're totally wrong,
there's something I always say, like, you always figure it out. If you're someone that's like, you are energetic, like you have that motivation, you always figure it out.
Exactly.
We haven't done enough in terms of like investing in people. I'm someone that I believe that like, we need to care about others, right? Because at the end of the day, whatever you do or whatever you build, the people that would continue that thing on, even if the unexpected happens, right? It's people, it's not machines, right? It's not that thing in the cloud that will make it work. The way I think about this is, if we can impact 2 to 3 people and make them like really brilliant, they would also see it as, oh, for example, Abdul did this for me, I would also want to do it. Think of like the person that invested in me, right? What I want to do is like, if I'm able to impact 30 people, right? I feel like maybe 60% of that, they will also impact others. And that just keeps going. It's like a circle. And that's what I live by every day, like just like helping people. Most of my investment, like I said, it's not about like the exits, right? How much can you make from 5K or 10K? So, but it's, if you can really be that person that makes someone excited, like, oh, this guy invested in me, that's enough for me as a person.
I love that. So let's round it up with talking about Mono. What's the evolution, right? You know, we've seen you guys' success so far, where the whole ecosystem is happy and proud. We talked about how the ecosystem has changed so much in the past few years. So what's the evolution for Mono as a business, and also for you as an entrepreneur? What's coming up?
So I think for Mono, when we started, it was mostly like open banking, right? How can we make it possible for businesses and developers to access all this data that are stored by financial institutions, right? Now we're also thinking of, what if Mono becomes that infrastructure that powers the next generation of businesses that come online, right? Think of like 2016, 17, right? Paystack enabled Carrywise, Piggyvest, right? Without Paystack, these companies wouldn't be there. You see, without Flutterwave, these companies wouldn't be there. So at the end of the day, and when you ask me like, what's like my philosophy and things, what would make me proud and say, yeah, we're successful as a company, is if in the next 2-3 years, we see a lot of companies being built on top of Mono, right? So we see companies raising at $100 million and they're built on Mono, right? We see developers building their own companies and they're built on Mono. That's what would make me fulfilled, like, yeah, we've done it, right? And that's why we're building other products on top of the infrastructure that we built today, right? So we started with open banking, now we're doing banking as a service, right? So you can actually issue a physical MasterCard and get it delivered in 5 to 10 days through Mono. You can issue virtual cards, you can issue a bank account with interest, right? So all this at the end of the day is like, if you want to build a company, right, you can, and you want to build a fintech feature into it, right? You don't need to go anywhere, right? Everything is done on top of the Mono platform, right? And we want to replicate this across Africa, right? So now we're live in Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, we're going to Egypt, right? So when we get to a point where developers and businesses are being built on top of this platform, that's success for us. And I think as a person, at the end of the day, again, it's still the same thing. If I can see a developer from anywhere, like from one village or one town, becoming successful because of what we've enabled, what we've powered for them, that's a good thing for me.
I love it. Yeah. Thanks for coming, man.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, man. Yeah. And thank you all for tuning in. Please like, subscribe. We'll continue to have amazing interviews like this, and see you next time.